Hi, afternoon. Welcome to the webinar, rather. Long time no see. Today I'm going to talk about SAS programming for the Cloud Analytic Server and how we can access the CAS functionality. I'll look at some of the basics around the Viya runtimes, CAS sessions and libraries, how to load data into CAS tables, running SAS code in Viya and the differences between CAS and SAS-based processing. Sorry, that jumped. How to share and save data in CAS and a suggested programming pattern and a brief demo just to bring it all together. So the Cloud Analytic Services, what is it? It's a cloud-based runtime environment which has been built by SAS to provide key functionality for a cloud-based application. So it's the part of the future of SAS, really. And it's has network access with a public API, so it's accessible through SAS clients, third-party clients, and open source clients. Data is held in a secure cloud, allowing all computing to happen close to the data. It's elastic, so you can add and jumped again, allowing all computing to happen close to the server, close to the data. It's elastic, so the server can add and remove nodes as demand changes, and fault tolerant. So if you get a failure on any one of the nodes, it will be recognized, isolated, and dropped from the cluster, and process it will continue on without as though nothing has happened. So an overview of the runtimes. So first of all, we'll just start off by signing in from the SAS client into the SAS Studio. That will then establish a link between your compute session and your CAS session, and then a CAS and a link back to the compute session. You can then expose your CAS libraries in SAS Studio, submit code against CAS data, which will be carried out by the various worker nodes, and then you can pass the data. Oops, too fast. And then you can save your data back via libraries into SAS Studio, and you get your results back in the same way. So CAS sessions and libraries, that's some background about the analytic service. How do we actually access it? Fairly simple. Start a CAS session. You just use a CAS statement, CAS colon. With a bit more control, you can do a named session and you can apply some session options. So there you've got session options for a timeout and setting the metric value to true, which gives you a bit of extra detail in the log. Wrong way. Once you're in, once your session is launched, you can assign CAS libraries, the CAS equivalents with SAS libraries using the CAS lib_all assign statement, and that will give you a picture of all of your CAS libraries. You can see the CAS libraries are the ones which have a little cloud icon on them. Or you can assign a specific CAS library using a libname statement and the CAS option in there. So on that. CAS libraries themselves are similar to SAS libraries, but container instances that can hold CAS tables either in memory or on disk. They can also hold metadata for data sources, which could be a directory path or connection details for a database. That's a directory path on the cloud. CAS libraries are also associated with access controls to define the groups and users who can access them. Once you've got a CAS sessions and CAD live set up, you need to load some data. There are a few ways to do it, but for SAS datasets, the most efficient way is to use the load data statement in the proc CAS util procedure. This allows parallel loading of a SAS dataset into CAS lib. You also have to note in here you've got the use of the replace keyword, which allows you to overwrite an existing CAS table. And you can see there on that you've got under the CAS user, you have a slightly different icons for the files on there, which we'll come to in a second. You can also do sequential loading into memory just by using a CAS library, a CAS lib name in place for normal output, like lib name in SAS code, and the data will be loaded into CAS lib as CAS. This is slightly less efficient for the reasons you'll see here. So when you do parallel lifting into memory, it distributes all the data to all the nodes straight in. But when you do, so that's a multi-threaded process. With a single process, you transmit the data to the CAS controller, which then distributes the data to the CAS worker nodes. So it's a little bit slower. You can save data from memory to storage. So obviously when you're in CAS, your tables are in memory, but you can save it down into the CAS user into storage, and notice there that it saves as a SAS-DAT format rather than the traditional SAS7BDAT file format, and that's a cloud native format optimized for CAS. Once you're finished, you can end your sessions with a terminate statement by the name to terminate a specific session, or all to close all sessions. A couple of handy hints. If you set the message level equals I in the options, you'll get a note in the log whenever the code is running on CAS, which can be quite useful for checking whether your code is actually being executed on CAS or in the SAS, or whether it's being executed on the SAS server. Similarly, you can also start up multiple CAS sessions named, and you can list all your CAS sessions by CAS_all list, and get some details about SAS versions and so on using the list about option in there. So running SAS code in Viya. Running the SAS code in CAS is very simple. You just use the CAS lib in place of the SAS lib names, and the data, if the data step or procedure is CAS compliant, it will run in CAS. So for this example, we've got a simple proc reg, the SAS9 code. There you can see it's referring to a CAS user library, so that would be operating on the CAS set. There is also a SAS Viya code here, an example which is a properly CAS enabled one. So it's using proc reg select, does the same thing. So standard procs will use the CAS data if a CAS lib is specified, but will execute in a SAS session. So that SAS9 code is actually going to execute on the SAS side, and though it will use the CAS data, it will actually be operating on the compute side. The SAS Viya code using reg select will actually execute directly in CAS. CAS enabled procedures, all base 9.4 procedures will work with CAS data. Most will actually run on the SAS session though. Some have been advanced and enhanced to take advantage of CAS, and that includes datasets, means, report, tabulate, and summary. You can also use proc sort, but that's mainly for deduplication, as sorting isn't really required. Can't use proc SQL, but you can use fed SQL. And the procedures available to you will depend on what you have licensed. If you have a base set with visual analytics, you have a base set when you have visual analytics license, but you have more added if you license visual minor or stat. And the CAS enabled procs, the ones which have been properly rewritten to use it, well, actually, you can see there's a list actually there on the documentation under SAS Viya procedures. But the ones that have been changed, they actually execute as CASL actions on the server. I'm not really going to cover CASL on this, but I have another presentation which does go through a bit more CASL in a bit more detail. Running data step code on SAS, on CAS. Data step code will execute in CAS when you have specified CAS librefs for input and output tables. You have to include at least one variable in the data step, and you can only use CAS supported language elements in the code. And that we note that CAS doesn't support zero-column tables. So what language elements are not supported? In-file input and data line statements are not supported. If you have any of those in your code, it will be running on the SAS client. Modify, remove, and replace statements are not supported in CAS. You cannot modify an in-memory table, and the where equals dataset option isn't supported on output datasets. So if it's present, the dataset will run in the SAS session. You can see restrictions in the data in the Viya programming documentation, because there's a little entry in there where the restriction says so that for that one, data lines, this statement is not supported in dataset that runs in CAS. So if you had a data line statement, it would just run it in your SAS session, which may not be what you intend. Significant difference in running SAS code on CAS is that there's the ordering in CAS tables. Due to the way data is split and stored on multiple nodes in CAS, any functions or statements that rely on the order of data may behave differently. You can specify the single threaded option on the data step to avoid the issue, but you may get a performance hit. You can see the follow those sort of statements there, including retain, diff, lag, sum statements, and temporary arrays. They can all cause you some problems. So as an example of that and a way to avoid it, the one on the left, the distributed data step, that put underscore n underscore may produce inconsistent results on large tables, and if it's repeatedly run. But as a simple way to get around it, you can just use that single equals yes, and that forces it to use single-threaded processing, so it will only use, it will produce consistent results. By-group processing is sort of related as well. With by-group processing, due to the way the data is split, in CAS, if by-groups are specified, the CAS will partition data on the formatted values of the first by-var, and rows within each by-group are then ordered on the raw values of the by variables. When you get multi-threaded, you get one thread for each by-group. Partitioning, which is something I cover a bit more in the other presentation, is more permanent and more efficient in CAS, and certainly with large data sets, much more effective, much more efficient. As an example for the by-group process, you can see there, if you have low cardinality, so in the one on the left, you've only got 2 by-groups, you'll only get 2 threads. If you have a high cardinality group where your by-group is, in that case, by age, you'll get multiple threads in there. So very high cardinality might not be ideal because you get a lot of threads. So you just choose your by-groups appropriately. Some elements behave differently in CAS. Functions like one of the significant changes in Viya is that the default encoding is UTF-8, which allows for multi-byte character sets, and there are also additional data types available in CAS. So with those multi-byte character sets, you'll get different results for char and varchar, so you need to be very clear over how you're using those. Functions like index that parse character strings to calculate length and position may return unexpected results. In general, data sets don't need sorting before merging or using procedures. That sort of happens as a result of the partitioning in the CAS. Macro code is pre-compiled as normal on the SAS client session, and then we'll execute on the CAS side. There are limitations, so the data step macro functions and call routines, simget, simgetn, simput, call simput x, call simput n, they're not supported. So if you've got those in your code, you'll need to, they will error, you'll need to resolve that somehow. Sharing data in CAS. Global tables allow the sharing of data. You promote your tables to a global CAS library, which can then be accessed by other users for analysis or processing. Otherwise, if it's a session, it's just local to you. Certainly, if somebody's doing if you want to do downstream processing with it within something like visual analytics or VDMML, the machine learning modules, then you'll want to promote your tables into the global one so they can be shared and used probably. And you can share data using using proc CAS util just to promote the data there. So that's going to promote the class data set, or you can use the promote equals yes option on the data set. Note that CAS is strict, so you have to overwrite tables. You first got to drop the table, or tell SAS you're going to overwrite it. It's a little bit more picky than SAS itself. A programming pattern for CAS, which is a fairly useful model for it, really. I mean, you start CAS as we did before. Assign your SAS library to the CAS libs. Load your data into CAS. Use the CAS lib reference in code. Once you've done your processing, save your CAS lib data. If you need to share it, promote it to a global, and then stop, and that's it. I'll just jump over now to do a demo. Hopefully this will work. Right, I think you should be able to see a SAS session. Hopefully. Anyway, hopefully you can. And this is like I said, it's a fairly basic program. Cool, you can see it. This is a fairly basic program I built just to demo this, really. It's just going to use some mortality data, some GDP data, and load them into CAS, and we'll merge them all together and produce some graphs, some charts out of it. But first of all, just set some options. So I'm going to set the message level equal to I, and then we'll start our CAS session and list all the sessions in detail. So I'll just run that. And you can see here, because I've got the message level equal to I, it's telling me where it's telling me it's executing on the CAS lib. It's executing on the CAS server. It's listed all the sessions. So I've got a session demo and lots of useful information in the libraries now. And then I'm going to import my data. So set some file names pointing at some CSVs I've got loaded up. Then we're going to load them in using proc CAS util. Also take something from SAS help, a SAS help dataset, and load that in. And that all worked. So again, it's telling me it's using the SAS Analytic Services is doing it, and it's uploaded it okay. Telling me I'll use the list tables options in here, so it's giving me a list of tables. So I've got my mortality, my region, and my GDP file loaded in. And then down here, I've loaded in the demographic data as well. Now we'll just use proc CAS util again, and we can use the data from the CAS user in CAS lib is CAS user, and the out CAS lib is CAS user. And we're going to alter some tables. So we're going to alter the region table, rename some of the columns, keep only a subset. Similarly for the demographic, similarly for GDP. Notice these are all using this syntax here, which is actually the CASL syntax, really. Slightly different to standard SAS. And that all worked. So again, it's telling you that the Cloud Analytic server did that for you. And I use proc MD summary, which is the proc summary version, the CAS-enabled version of proc summary, to summarize my mortality data. And then I'm going to merge it in with the various bits of, with the demographics and the GDP data. And again, this is all data step stuff, but you can see, although it's data step, you've got a merge in there. It says it's telling you it's running data step in the Cloud Analytic Service, and it's using multiple threads. And then let's produce some plots. And there we go. Some output plots of the mortality versus GDP by year for various different regions. It's fairly nonsensy sort of data, but just knocked it together. So having done that, if we wanted to keep that data set that we created, which generated this, which is the country mort per 100K. If we wanted to save that, we could just use proc CAS util and save it out, and it'll tell it where to do it and it'll replace it. So we'll do that, and then we can also then use proc CAS util to promote it to the public so that people can use it. We can save it and use it later. And there we go. So that's now available in here, public. Should have that. Yeah, country mort per 100K is now in there. So that could then be accessed by other people and used for downstream analysis or whatever you were, dashboards or whatever you were using it for. So I think that's probably pretty much it. And then just clean up. I won't run any of the other bits. Back to my. Screen share. There we go. So that was demo. In summary, CAS sessions are created alongside standard SAS sessions. CAS libs are connections to in-memory and cloud stored data. You modify SAS 9 code with CAS libs to use CAS, to use the CAS server. Sequential row processing doesn't really apply. Sorting isn't necessary. You want to consider your data step by group processing, any sort of legacy row dependent statements and functions, and the use of _n. And proc CAS util is a Swiss army of CAS table handling. And you can do all sorts of stuff with that. And that is it. Thank you. There's a bit of link to the documentation on the presentation there. Thanks. Any sort of questions or? Oh, yeah. Can we schedule jobs for regular reporting? Yeah, I mean, it's the same as any other piece of SAS code, really. I mean, you can put CAS code into DI Studio and work off and get that to run and schedule it in that way, or you can schedule jobs in batch. So yeah, it's schedulable. It's just normal SAS code, really. But well, this was the CAS actions for which using CAS-L. CAS-L is a slightly different language, and like I say, I might cover that. I'll cover that in a different presentation sometime. But yeah, it can be scheduled. And within SAS Studio, I think there are flow jobs and so on is coming through all the time. It's slightly changing at the moment because of the way SAS Viya is being developed and rolled out, but more and more that is available. Yeah. Cool. Thanks. I hope that was interesting for you, Radha. And I'll probably try and do another one sometime, but I'll do the more advanced one.